Today is April 16th, 2024. My name is Bobby Goodman, and I have the pleasure of interviewing Jack Baum, Mark Kleinman, who's joined us by Zoom, and Daniel Prescott about their involvement with the Dallas Kosher Chili Cook-Off. Welcome, guys.
Good to see you, Bobby.
Thank you
for having us.
Thank you. So let's start off with Brayshit. When did this chili cook-off begin? Daniel, why don't you start us off here? Or do you, if you remember?
I was raised in a cabin. No. So I was trying to think about when it all started back when, just to prepare for today. And I do remember that back in, almost 30 years ago, the community was a little fractured, not like it is today where it's really fractured, but it was kind of fractured back then. And there was a new organization that had just moved to town called Dallas Area Tour Association Data. And there was just a lot of friction going on between organizations and synagogues and what have you. And I remember walking to synagogue one Shabbos, and I was trying to think about what might bring a community together, right? You know, because we were all so fractured. And I had this crazy idea about, food. Jews like food. And we're Texas. And I remember walking into Shari Tefillah at the time. I walked into Shari Tefillah with this idea about chili cook-off. And I actually saw Roy Hirschberg, may his soul rest in peace, in the lobby at the synagogue. And I went up to him and I said, "Would you participate?" I couldn't even finish the sentence. And he said, "Oh my gosh, that would be great." So I knew that would be something that I just felt in my kishkis that would be something that would resonate, right? So I went to my two best buds, and they said no. So I asked Jack and Mark. Now I went to Jack and Mark to ask them what they thought, and would this be something we could all do together? And that's how I remember it. Now these guys will give you the real story.
Right. Well, do you? So Jack, do you remember what year this started?
I know the first one was 29 years ago, so Dan's probably exactly right about the idea coming up 30 years ago. And so that would have been 94, maybe?
Mm-hmm. Okay, great.
1994.
So,
you know, it's something on the 95 mission, we took those first T-shirts with us to promote the cook-off, because we were doing everything we could to promote the cook-off.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I was on that mission. That was great. So who would you say, Mark, and you can chime in too, whose idea was this? I know we heard from Daniel, or was it really a one-person idea and it snowballed, or did you guys get together and brainstorm on something to do? Mark?
I came in, after the idea phase. I think these guys needed somebody to actually get the work done. And so that's where I came in. And at the time, I thought it would be, I thought it was a great idea. It was something that I thought I'd enjoy working on, and I know I'd enjoy working with the two of them. So I was happy to join. But at least in its early phase, it came to me as, already as an idea. I'd like to think that I had a chance to help shape it along the way as we led up to the first one, and especially the first two or three. And I felt like these guys were, kind of open to those types of suggestions as it came together. But the idea itself was before my involvement.
Yeah, and to Mark's point, I think Danny had the idea, and I think it was easy for Mark and I to get on board with that. As Dan suggested, Reform Jews were always talking about Orthodox Jews, and Orthodox Jews were always talking about Reform Jews, and both of them were talking about conservative Jews. And, in Dan's vision, it seemed like this was a way that we could bring the whole community together. I remember in the beginning, there were several organizations that didn't keep kosher, and they said, if you want to make this a community event, why does it have to be kosher? And our answer to that wasn't a theological answer was more of a lowest common denominator answer. And we felt like we wanted it to be kosher so that everybody could participate. And so we tried, in everything we did, I think we tried to look for the lowest common denominator. And I enjoyed working with Mark and Dan because Dan was an idea a minute and Mark wanted to kill every idea. And so it was really, it really came off really well. And I think the three of us worked well at the time together. And I think, I think we're proud of it. And when you think about this event 30 years later in 2024, in light of the events that happened on October 7th, again, the community seems a little bit fractured, and it was just really enjoyable to be there this year and to watch everybody come together. There were old faces in the crowd. There were new faces in the crowd. And again, everybody, it seemed like there wasn't a care in the world. And it seemed like all of the Jews with every opinion in the world came together and put that aside for this one day. And I feel really good that it's a community event. And, obviously thrilled to work on it with Dan and Mark.
I was just going to say that if you looked at it this year, so many of the aspects that we all put into it on the first year are still there. So each tent holding 8 teams right next to each other. We forced them to use the middle tables between the teams to have to work together as they were cutting their ingredients. In fact, we specifically didn't give every team enough items so that they would have to share. They were forced to work together. So the Temple of Manuel, who were just so wonderful to participate early in the game, might be cooking next to some Shari Tefillah Orthodox folks, and they've never maybe even met. But now they're working next to each other in the tent, cooking their various chilies, competing each other in a friendly way, but working together. And that just added an element of community to it that I think we all three thought was special.
Yeah, and we put a lot of thought into how we combine those, how we place the teams too. We wanted to make sure that we had good diversity among congregations and then good diversity between congregations and organizations. So to Dan's point, we force those situations a little bit to try to accomplish the bigger goal of the cook-off.
Right. Obviously, some method to the madness. I think I know the answer to this, but for the community, I think it would be kind of fun if you each shared a little bit about, well, like, how long you guys known each other? And, you talk about, he was the 2 guys I wanted to do this with. Share with us a little bit about y'all's friendships, how long it goes back.
We're not friends.
I think we became friends like in year 5 of the cook-off.
After we were done with the first 3 years, we became friends again.
Our wives were shared it by then, and we became friends.
Now, I've known Mark and his family. Jack isn't from Dallas, and Mark and I both grew up here, and so I've known Mark and his family for, gosh, I don't know, for so many different years. And their family is really iconic in the city for everything that they've accomplished, and mother and their father and his brothers, and of course Mark. They've all done so much, and so I've known the family, and I've been around Mark and his brothers for quite a long time. And then when Jack moved to the city, he and I met. I don't even know when we met. Probably late '80s, and we just all got along. Our wives got along, and I wouldn't have thought of doing this event with anybody else, to be honest with you. It took people who didn't mind working, rolling up their sleeves, who had great ideas, who had connections, and who, we could laugh with. And we did. There was a lot of laughter in all of those early years. I mean, there were so many stories and so much that we went through. So that's how I recall it. But
yeah, and I think we're all really fortunate. All of our kids turned out really well. Mark and I were just talking about this yesterday. And we raised kids together. I mean, we got to know each other really well by raising kids together. And our kids are like brothers and sisters, and they have the same ethics. And I never worried about my kids being over at Mark's house or Dan's house. We all were singing from the same sheet music. And these guys were just great to befriend and be friends with. And so when Dan came up with the idea, like I said, it was really easy for Mark and I to get on board. And Mark's usually a no waiting to be asked. And so I knew that every time Dan came up with another element, Mark would kill it. And so I knew we could handle it.
Mark, you have anything to say about that comment?
Well, Dan had been haunting me with what I call feature creep for a number of years, going all the way back to days in Federation campaign leadership, where he used to, kind of come up with new ideas and new ways to kind of expand programs in a way that, would fall to me to implement. So I was used to it, and I developed a little bit of a hard skin to it.
Well, it sounds like the start got off great with you guys. Let's talk a little bit about how you got people involved. And I mean, obviously, the first year you probably felt like you were handling everything from start to finish. But let's talk a little bit about how you got people involved. What was the outreach? How did that come about?
Well, we all shared in that. And it's morphed over time. But I will tell you the most interesting, and I would argue maybe the most difficult, was getting Tiferet Israel to allow us to have it, because the leadership at that time they didn't think it was going to work. And in fact, they were scared to death they were going to lose money. And I didn't have two nickels rubbed together. But I remember I went to the executive board meeting of the Tiferet, and they were pushing back, and I took my checkbook out of my back pocket. That's back then when you carried a checkbook, and I put it on the table, and I said, I promise to cover any losses. Now I did that. I used the National Bank of America NBA because my checks would bounce pretty high. So I had nothing to back that with. So it made me work a little bit harder. But no, it was a tough sale initially to Tiferet, but all three of us went and talked to folks and got those first initial 12 teams to participate, and then the judges to participate. And really, honestly, it was a snowball from there. Once the people that came and saw the first and what could happen on what was a beautiful day, it just became a snowball from that standpoint. And it was easier, but what do you guys think?
I think one of the ideas that really worked for this event is we pulled in so many other synagogues and so many other organizations that it just mushroomed into people wanting to participate. I agree with Dan. It was a little bit tough in the beginning. Everybody thought it was a crazy idea in the beginning, and we had a lot of confidence in it. And after the first year, it just grew exponentially participation wise, and it naturally brought a lot of people with it. And so, it was a big endeavor, and, a lot of people think it's the best community event that's in Dallas right now. And I think it started out with the seed of a very small idea, and it's really grown upon itself because of the inclusiveness of synagogues and other organizations.
Would you say first year tough sell, second through 29 easy sell?
First year went well. I think what Dan was saying is the pre-sell was a little bit tough, but once, as Dan said, once we got the snowball rolling downhill, it caught on from the beginning, including that very first year.
It was hard.
And that's more speaking, though, to the teams, because even from the very first year, we were just really blessed with an amazing turnout. I mean, I think Dan used to had a sort of inflated sense of crowd estimate, but I do think we probably had 1,000 people there that first year. I mean, so we did a great job of publicizing it. Then the organizations who participated did a great job of encouraging their membership to come. And so fortunately, we didn't have to create the community interest. The teams, we worked a little bit to get the teams there, especially in the early year or two when it was being established, but we were very fortunate that the community showed up.
It was a harder sell for things like, first of all, not everybody has the vision that these two guys have and the ability to see through a problem to the opportunity on the other side. talking to the Vada Kashrut originally was difficult because they threw a lot of stumbling blocks in front of us, and Jack tackled a lot of them, and it was a challenge, but we were able to overcome those stumbling blocks to the point where they oftentimes will say it's the best community event because more people eat kosher that day. And the reason why I say that simply is because so many people that come that never eat kosher, and they're eating kosher that day. So the other thing is that we did a good job of thinking through removing stumbling blocks like price. We made it to where young kids are getting free because we didn't want families with 5, 6, 8 kids having to pay for each one. It just didn't. So we gave a hot dog away. Remember the first time we would give a hot dog away to kids that were at a certain age, and we didn't make the teams pay much to get into the chili cook-off at the initial few years. So we really wanted to remove as many stumbling blocks for everybody else so that it would create that snowball effect. And these guys were great at thinking through some of this.
Awesome.
And I think the Bob volunteered their time as well. They were very supportive. The other thing I guess I'd point out is that the Tiferet community supported it hugely. It was going to be impossible to do without a huge number of volunteers for everything from setup to, runners to ticket takers and all the activities. And really the entire Tiferet community really stepped up to make that possible because couldn't have been done without, a large number of volunteers. And that was where they were coming from.
Let me ask you, how are the charities or the organizations picked to receive many donations each year? How do y'all come up with that?
Well, we thought one of the ways to sell it to the community is that a percentage of the proceeds would go back to the community. And in fact, not everybody was a fan of that. We three were, but not everybody was a fan of it, but they came around to it. And so there was no special way that I know of that we selected those charities. We would, I know over the years, some have applied for those funds, and powers that be at Tiferet right now make those decisions. Originally, we felt like that was another way to get community support, that if a portion of those proceeds ended up going to an organization other than Tiferet. If the truth be known, it's more of a fundraiser than a funds raiser. It's not a huge financial boon for Tiferet Israel, but it does allow for people to get together, have a good time, meet. And I just want to echo what Jack said earlier. I went this year and I typically recognize a fair number of folks. There were so many people there this year that I hadn't seen before that I was just thrilled to see they were out there having a good time. So anyway, we wanted it to be a community event, and I think that's why the three of us decided to give back to the community that way.
So I know year after year it becomes a big hit, and like y'all said, one of the great events of the year. But how do you think the cook-off today, how is it being promoted other than word of mouth? Or is it?
I think most of it's word of mouth. Some of it is, the TJP covers it before and after. And then there's a lot of yard signs, which I don't even know whose idea that was in the beginning. But there's a lot of yard signs that are put out on the chili cook-off. And then fortunately, Tiferet is right on Hillcrest with probably 70 or 80,000 cars a day, many of which are Jewish. Mm-hmm. And they put up signage beforehand, and the buzz just gets around. And the other thing that's brilliant about it, is that we had how many teams this year, Dan?
32, I believe.
So we have 32 teams this year. So you have 32 organizations telling their board and telling their constituents, mm-hmm. and reminding people from the Bima that the chili cook-off is going to be there. So it has this natural viral effect to it, which was really inherent in the very first event we did. And really, hats off to Dan for figuring out that viral aspect to it, to where we've never really spent money marketing it at all.
That's great. So you start off with 12 teams in year one, and you say this past year, a few weeks ago, we had 32 teams. That's unbelievable. Obviously, there's an impact to the Jewish community. What do you think that impact is?
Mark?
Mark?
I think it's a good community builder. I think it builds understanding among different congregations and different organizations. I think that it encourages interactions that wouldn't otherwise take place, and in a way that I think we all know fosters understanding and tolerance and support.
Yeah, and if you think about it in this year, but we could pick almost any year. If you think about it this year, there's so many events, and people don't want to go to another Sunday night event with rubber chicken. And so, if you think about the dynamics of this whole event, you don't have to deal with double chicken, rubber chicken. You don't have to deal with a Sunday night event, and the community needs healing. This community, like every community around the world, needs healing. And this was an event where people could again come together and forget their issues, forget the problems of Israel, forget the problems around the world, and just spend 2 or 3 hours with their family, with other families, with music, with food. It's just an interesting gathering, and I think we're pulling people together more than anything else. I think the original idea for this was to bring people together, and I think we're still bringing people together. And I couldn't not think about this year about the healing effects that the Kosher Chili Cook-Off has. The other thing is, we've mentioned Tiferet Israel a couple of times, and I think it's important to note that the name of the cook-off is the Dallas Kosher Chili Cook-Off. It's by Tiferet Israel. And everything we've done, we've tried to do as a community event. And we want to be respectful to everybody that's involved in it. So.
Everybody's in their echo chamber now, and they're all kind of buried into their phone. They're also very much parsed by generation and age. So this is an opportunity for great-grandparents, grandparents, their kids, their grandkids, great-grandkids to come out and to enjoy an afternoon together, doing whatever it is, whether they're on the rides or listening to music, they're eating chili, they're having a hot dog, whatever the case is. And once they get out of that echo chamber and they see that the Dallas Jewish community isn't exactly what they thought it was through their lens, it's much broader than that. And it's across a lot of spectrum. It's very positive. It's just a very positive opportunity for people to see beyond their fence into other yards and shake hands and meet people that are maybe Jewish but not exactly like them. And I think that has an awful lot of positive to it.
This year, like many years, I had 4 generations of my family at the cook-off. And to go home that afternoon and have each of those people in those generations tell me, wow, you guys must be really proud of what you put together. That was really fun. I mean, to think about, 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds and 7-year-olds and 30-year-olds and 60-year-olds, having fun at the same event, and then thinking that there's a whole group of 90-plus-year-old there having fun. And for all of those people to enjoy the same event, it's very rare. And I think that's why Dan and I looked at it this year and said, wow, it's lasted the test of time, and it's really interesting.
You guys obviously started this big snowball effect. I'm curious, do y'all chair it, or do y'all have chairs that take it over year to year?
We chaired it many years in the first 10 years. Our wives chaired it many years in the first 10 years. But we've been fortunate that other people have taken over. And I think it's really special that we allow other people to come in and chair the event.
Yeah, even though they sure could use help and they've asked for it. No, it's we try to volunteer where we can and help out, and whether it's getting sponsors or promoting it, but the actual physical activity we've taken a couple of steps away from. But if they needed us, we'd be there. We would say
yeah.
no.
They asked me to solicit, multiple sponsors this year, which I was happy to do. I don't think we ever say no to them. I recruited several teams this year for them, but we allow other people to step in and cheer it.
In your wildest dreams, did you believe that this would? It's going on it's 30 years, but Did you ever think when you started this would be a 25-year adventure, or could you even envision that we're 30 years into this?
No, I'll be honest with you. I ran scared the first year, to be totally frank with you, because of, I didn't know how it was going to turn out, and I didn't know how many people were going to participate, and we did. It wasn't like everybody was just 100% gung ho. There were people that pushed back. This isn't going to work. There's always the negative Nellies that come into fray, and so you try to stay positive and move forward. I would have never thought 30 years. I am just thrilled to see. I remember some of those early years. You'd have some of those data rabbis coming over on Saturday night helping us decorate, and it really turned into be something that everybody participated and enjoyed. But I don't know. Maybe these guys saw it 30 years down the road. I never could even imagine it 30 years down the road. I just wanted us to have a successful first year. And then once I saw it the first year, I knew that year two, and it really morphed. The success, and people that didn't come heard so much about it. It was that they couldn't miss it the very next year. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I missed. And to this day, I get phone calls from people who said, when is the chili cook-off? I'm going to be out of town this date. It's not that date, is it? And the reaction is great, and from all over the community. It's fun.
That first year, Mark and I weren't as nervous as Dan because our checkbook wasn't on the table.
Well, you had Dane.
Yeah.
So I want each of you to chime in on this last question, and then we can open it up if you have anything else you'd like to say. And Mark, we'll start off with you. What do you hope or envision for the future of the cook-off?
I think I hope that it continues to renew itself, like Dan talked about, new faces, new teams, new challenges. The nature of it allows it to renew itself. And so I just would hope that could continue year after year and achieve some of the same results that we hope for in the very first one.
Wow, that was great, Mark. I would certainly echo everything that Mark just said. I just hope that generations that come invest their time and energy in it and find it to be as enjoyable as the generations that came before them, and participate and look at it as an opportunity. What we really wanted to have happen is an opportunity for people to leave their differences on Hillcrest and to walk to the back of the synagogue and just become part of something greater than whatever their differences were, which is the Dallas Jewish community. So I just hope that continues with, like Mark says, new people and new teams and new ideas and new direction.
Yeah, I think, as Dan said, I echo everything that Mark and Dan said. And I think if we encourage people to step up and do different things in this community and to really have the courage and the willingness to try new things, I hope the Chili Cook-Off is an example of that. I hope one day that we'll all see our kids become the kind of leaders that it took to put this together. A lot of people don't know, but Mark's daughter, Amanda, is a cantor, and she just led a trip to Israel, and she handled everything on that trip from soup to nuts in a very, tough situation. And it went off phenomenally well. I've got to believe that Amanda stepped up to lead that mission and to lead in the Jewish community and her community because of the things that we did as families in this community. And I think that says it all. And I hope this goes from generation to generation, Lador Vador. And I hope this is just one example of an event that can make a difference in this community and encourages other communities. I can't tell you how many times Mark or Dan or I got calls from other communities telling us that they wanted to put a chili cook-off together in their community because they were visiting friends in this community and they happened to come to the chili cook-off. And we were always proud to help that. We never thought that was an invasion of our idea or anything like that. We thought it was really great. And so, we just hope this community and all Jewish communities go from strength to strength. And if we played a small part in that, that feels good.
That's awesome. What a great compliment these communities really are sharing with you guys. Anything else that I may have missed that you wanted to add? Because the community is very fortunate for all that y'all have done. And anything that you'd like to add to?
I'd like to ask, I have one in mind, but I want to ask my co-chairs, what surprised you going back to the beginning? I have a couple of things, but what surprised you going back to the early years that you wouldn't have expected? Mark?
Well, I think the thing that surprised me was the types of food that people would call chili. Peas and carrots and ketchup, for example. But that was, I think, what we asked for when we told people, as long as they use the right ingredients to make whatever they wanted. But we saw things. We saw buffalo chili. We've seen all kinds of things over the years. Obviously, some vegetarian chilies and some, hot chilies and chilies that are not so hot they're terrible. But that's been the biggest surprise to me, is just sort of seeing what comes out of that pot.
Yeah, and I think taking that same concept and talking about people, I think we've all three been surprised by the people who are not involved very much in the Jewish community, but step up to cook or to participate or to chair this event, and to see those people being drawn into the Jewish community to participate. And they're so proud of the fact, and they all want to look at us and say, what did you think of my chili? And they all have a lot of pride in what they're putting into it. And again, you see people participating side by side with others at this event that don't participate in any other event. And I think that's awesome.
All right, so the two things that I just cannot get out of my head were the big halachic argument in the early years about beans or no beans in chili, whether you can really have chili with beans or not beans, and how we had to have the people wanted to come up the night before. I think Temple Emmanuel was one of them that wanted to come up the night before and soak their beans, because they had to soak for a certain hour, and we had to have it on premise. So I thought that was one. And then the first year, we did the judging where we had the judges walk around. We thought it would be cool if everybody saw the judges walking around from team to team. Well, there was such a controversy amongst the teams after that they announced who won. Oh, these judges, they knew who was behind the table. They made us go to secret blind testing where we had to write the numbers under the cups, go out and collect the chili. They're behind closed doors inside the synagogue from year 2 all the way on. It was actually kind of fun how serious they took the competition to win the Kosher Chili Cook-Off. That they wanted to make sure that they could do everything they could to win it, and that there was nobody taking advantage of anybody else. I thought that surprised me that they were going to be that competitive.
That's awesome.
I got one thing to add. One thing that's really helped make this a success has been fantastic weather year after year. And from the very first year, we had asked Rabbi Mendel Dubrowski at the Chabad on Forest Lane to chair the weather committee. And we literally asked him to do that. And he has come through. He came through every single year. We've just been really fortunate, because that is a real difference maker.
And the halachic issue with that is you're not allowed to pray to not have rain, because you want rain to come to feed the crops. And so we don't know how Mendel does it, but he always figures out how to make sure that the rain comes, but not during the cook-off.
Yeah.
but I think what we were told by Mr. Malka was that you pray for rain to come in its season. And so,
and not between the time of 11 and 3.
Especially when
Central Time.
That's awesome. Guys, first of all, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts today. I thank you. The community thanks you. You've really left an unbelievable mark on this community.
Thanks, Bobby.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
thanks for doing this.